The first Mishigos, being the true and complete account of creation as told by nobody in particular, as all parties have declined to comment. Before the world began, there was nothing, not a thing. This was not as peaceful as it sounds. This complete absence of existence, quantity, or meaning meant there were no temples, no festivals held in the names of the divine, no crops grown in honor of those most holy, no wars fought over divine interpretation, no one squatting in sacred fields, no fertilization of sacred crops, or much else for that matter. There were no marriages held at an altar, nor were there any marriages nullified 17 years later, after the two joined had forgotten all the good reasons for which they married in the first place. There were, however, the gods. Gods who existed in a condition of complete theological privacy, which again sounds restful. It wasn't. At least, not as far as the gods were concerned, and this, in fact, was the whole problem. The gods, sitting squat in the vast, howling nothingness that surrounded them, were receiving precisely no prayers, no offerings, no requests for their intercession in boundary disputes or crop failures, catastrophes of a romantic nature, or matters of succession. The gods, in a word, were bored, unequivocally bored. Fuka, the yet-to-be-decided goddess of the land, had been patient. She had been understanding. But as there was nothing to be patient with or understanding about, said, "This," her arms spread to indicate the aforementioned nothingness, "is not enough." And while the other gods agreed, little came by way of a suggestion as to what to do about it. No meeting was called, which is undoubtedly important to note. No notice was given. No agenda had been set. No preliminary document had been circulated outlining the purpose, structure, or expected outcomes of a forthcoming divine assembly. This, of course, as anyone familiar with meetings will immediately recognize, was a meeting, the total absence of preparation being the surest sign. Such dynamics also tend to indicate that something is about to go horribly and profoundly wrong in a very formal and organized way. And so the gods did gather, as they literally had nowhere else to be. Fuka nudged her husband Scrum, our eventual god of the sacred outpouring that asks forgiveness rather than permission. He said, "Look, we're bored, and we know you're all bored as well. All except for Zeta, who did not attend, having a pretty good idea how this would all play out." Vordis was already nodding. This was what Vordis did. He nodded warmly, and certainly with the absolute conviction of a god who had never, not once, required specificity. What was lost would return. Exactly how was as yet to be determined. "What we need," said Vordis, "is a return to what we once had, a restoration, a recovery of what has been lost." "We haven't lost anything," said Junis, Vordis's consort and our eventual goddess of perpetual veracity. "We've never had anything." "Exactly," said Vordis, nodding more warmly. Juridax, the once and future lord of holy clauses, nobody has read, and silences that imply consent. Parchment in hand, and partially filled in, as was his way, said, "I've drafted some preliminary remarks regarding the procedural framework for this assembly, the question of quorum, the definition of binding resolution, and the establishment of a subcommittee to determine the appropriate scope of a further subcommittee to be convened at a date to be specified. Kaveen said nothing. She simply raised an eyebrow, which communicated everything. Specifically, "This is going to be a disaster, and every one of you will come to me afterward and expect sympathy, and you will not be getting it." All eyes avoided the eyebrow. Bureaucrats, having seen that look before, then looked at his parchment. He had not accounted for disaster. He made a note. He would account for it in the revised draft. The idea, when it came from Scrum. This surprised no one. He was an orc of large gestures with complicated downstream consequences that someone else generally cleaned up. He looked around the nothing with the expression of an orc who has been given no outlet for his particular set of capabilities and has decided to find one. "We make something," said Scrum. "We make something big. We put it out there. We are worshipped for it, and we are then no longer bored." "What do we make?" asked Fuka. "We should start with something with worshippers in it already." "Oh, I do like that," said Bureaucrats. Kaveen, her ear tips turning ever so slightly forward, raised her other eyebrow with a now interested grin. "You can't put worshippers in before the thing that they would be worshipping you from," Fuka said. "I'll start big," said Scrum. "The worshippers will follow." Fuka began to say something about this logic. She did not finish. Scrum had already started. The universe, it must be said, went in roughly the right direction. This is not praise, simply acknowledgement that things could have gone much worse. Worse in ways that would have been impossible to describe, because there would have been no one to describe them. It had stars. It had matter. It had the general structural architecture of something that could, in principle, support existence. In this narrow, technical sense, Scrum had not failed. What Scrum had not accounted for, however, was scale. The universe was enormous. In retrospect, ludicrously, embarrassingly, and pointlessly enormous. The gods had wanted worshippers. They'd wanted temples and festivals, and the particular satisfaction of being the named recipient of innumerable gratitudes. They had not wanted, and had not asked for, and could not have reasonably anticipated, a creation of such size that light from one corner would not reach another corner for billions and billions of years. A creation most of which would contain nothing except hydrogen, doing very slow and unrewarding things. "This," said Fuka, looking at it, "is too much." "But it's impressive," said Scrum. "It's embarrassing," said Fuka. "Nobody needs this much universe. We need a world, maybe a moon." "This," she exclaimed, pointing in all directions simultaneously, "is something a mind cannot finish thinking about." "Our worshippers will make use of it all, eventually," shrugged Scrum. "The worshippers don't exist yet," said Fuka. "Fuka, my love," said Scrum, "I can't build this thing in a day. The worshippers are coming." And come they did. Zeta did not attend the meeting. because Zeta had seen how meetings go. He'd seen, over the long preceding nothing, how his little family, with too much time and insufficient outlets for their particular capabilities, tended to produce, when assembled, outcomes considerably worse than what the void was already offering. So Zeta had excused himself from the nothing in the direction of a different corner of the nothing, and contemplated nothing else in particular. When Scrum had finished and the worshippers multiplied, Zeta said to nobody, "Look what they did." This was not criticism, it was not praise. This was the statement of a being who has seen the thing that was going to happen, and knew he'd still be here when everyone else had finished being embarrassed about what they made by accident at a meeting nobody called. As the universe expanded outward and the first improbable molecules of matter drifted past Zeta's corner of the nothing, he examined them with the expression of an orc who has been proven right by events and who will say nothing further on the subject. But the molecules had their purpose, he was sure. This universe they'd created wasn't exactly broken, but wrong. Wrong in the kind of small ways that accumulate. Zeta recognized this. Sustenance could be found here, however, not for the creators of this small but simultaneously enormous mess, but for its inhabitants, the poor beings made from dust and borrowed time. It was to these mostly innocent creatures Zeta focused his attention. For them, he could create small offerings of his own. Soup was a safe bet. Not because soup repairs a less than perfect world, not because soup repairs much of anything, but because the making of soup, gathering what's available, applying warmth, combining those things which were separate into something more full, nourishing, is the only honest response to a world in desperate need of repair that cannot be repaired in a single act of kindness. Still, kindness beat virtually all other options. As the universe progressed, arguments about whose fault it was outlasted, among other things, the formation of the particular star system in which our story takes place. Bureaucrats had documentation proving that his role had been strictly advisory. He had produced it before anyone had said anything. As the god of law, he was seldom without documentation of his divine innocence, especially for situations having not yet occurred. And his documentation was always thorough. Vordis expressed complete confidence that the situation was recoverable, and that what was needed was a return to a prior state of affairs in which none of this had happened. He was warm in his appraisal. He was certain. He was not, of course, specific. He simply nodded. "There is no prior state, dear," Junis whispered in his ear. "Only the here and now." Kaveen looked at the universe. Kaveen looked at the gods. Kaveen raised both eyebrows again. All avoided her glance, again. Puka and Scrum had stopped speaking to each other. Together they embodied abundance, fertility, and the sacred union from which all life flows. At present, they embodied a marital dispute. In the aftermath of this dispute, the gods sat down before the thing they'd made, this vast, humming, ever-expanding universe, unspooling in every direction with no apparent end and no particular purpose beyond existing in the general vicinity of their ambitions. Alas, none of them could bring themselves to admit, out loud or to each other, what all of them feared, that they had no idea what to do next. And saying nothing, when you have no idea what to say, is considerably more comfortable than saying something, because saying something could lead to something else, like a meeting. And their last meeting had produced a universe nobody had budgeted for. Thus the gods slowly turned away from their creation, a creation that nevertheless went on generating prayers, offerings, pleas for intercession, and other catastrophes at precisely the rate they'd wanted. Only no one was now minding the store. Indeed, the gods became silent, and silent they have remained ever since. The faithful interpret this as dignity. In this regard, the faithful are not entirely wrong.